You're standing in a candlelit office in the 1700s. The air is thick with ink and beeswax. On a heavy oak desk lies a mountain of parchment, all folded, tied, or pinned in place. A clerk sighs deeply as he unknots a red ribbon from a court document, only to find that the thread has frayed and snapped. He mutters something unkind under his breath about the Crown's procurement policies. You probably won't survive this well, your patience won't. Because paperwork, even before there were actual papers, has always been a bit of a disaster. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from tonight, and what time is it there? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take your first step down the creaky staircase of time, and somewhere between the musty scent of vellum and the faint scratching of quills, you begin to wonder how anyone ever managed a filing system. Parchment curls, wax seals crack, pins rust. Every document is a delicate artifact, and no two clerks seem to agree on how to organize them. You catch a glimpse of one frustrated scribe from Venice who has just burned an entire stack of unnumbered contracts out of sheer spite. Legend says that's how they discovered fireproof cabinets. It's not, but let's give him credit. The earliest offices, if you can call them that, ran more like chaotic scroll gardens than efficient workspaces. Ancient Egyptians used papyrus and leather thongs to roll and tie together scrolls, while Romans filed legal documents in wooden pigeonholes called armaria. But these were precious texts, not everyday memos. Most messages were oral, sent by runners with good memories or bad ones, depending on the outcome. As paper began creeping into Europe from the Islamic world through Spain in the 12th century, record-keeping evolved. Monks carefully copied ledgers by hand, binding them with clasps and cords, each bundle a small miracle of survival. You touch the edge of one volume and feel the faint groove of a nail scar. Someone once used an iron tack to keep the pages from fluttering in the wind. Fast forward to the 17th century, and a new class of bureaucrat emerges, the paper pusher, literally. These guys had to deal with piles of loose, unbound documents daily, and they got creative. You see one man in London using wax drops to glue pages together, a technique with the unfortunate side effect of sticking to everything, including his desk, his sleeve, and at one memorable moment, his boss's wig. Historians still argue whether the transition from scroll to sheet was driven more by administrative need or sheer exasperation, with unrolling 30 feet of goat hide every time someone asked for an invoice. Meanwhile, straight pins become the duct tape of the early office world. Long, sharp, and mildly terrifying, they were used to tack receipts to ledgers, attach notes to files, and according to one 1764 anecdote, fasten a debtor's IOU directly to his coat when he refused to pay up. You watch in slow motion as a woman in Paris carefully drives a pin through 4 layers of tax records only for the top sheet to tear in a protest. She sighs. The revolution is still decades away, but her patience has already fallen. You pause here to admire one of the unsung heroes of this era, the folding technique. Documents were often folded into precise shapes, triangles, booklets, or even envelope-like sleeves to protect them from dust and damage. Each fold a little whisper of purpose. You imagine origami-trained interns furiously trying to decode their master's logic. Is this a property deed? Or a tax receipt, folded like a swan? There's something poetic about this mess, though. Each system improvised local and uniquely flawed. The 15th century Florentines tied together their merchant ledgers with braided thread and sealed the knots with ink to prevent tampering. In China, government paperwork was organized with string loops punched through corner holes, foreshadowing the three-ring binder by several centuries. But as you wade through it all, one thing becomes clear. Nobody had yet invented a truly universal solution. You run your finger along the edge of a jagged brass clip, used briefly in German tax offices, effective but horrifyingly sharp. You smell the faint burn of a candle, too close to a wax seal. You hear the sighs, the crinkling of stiff parchment, the occasional curse in Latin. And somewhere in the background, you sense that the world is crying out for one thing. Something simple, something small, something that can bend but not break. You don't know it yet, but you're less than a century away from one of the quietest revolutions in office history. A revolution born not in fire or glory, but in a gentle twist of wire. You step forward through the fog of parchment and ink, and suddenly you flinch. There it is again. A glint. A jab. Now, that's the thing about pins, they're not loyal. Here in the 18th century, you're navigating a writing desk, crowded with quills, inkwells, and something that looks like medieval weaponry but turns out to be a paper fastener. A straight pin, to be precise. Not your average household pin, either. This one's long, hard to control, and slightly bent from its fifth reuse. It pierces stacks of receipts with brutal efficiency, but occasionally it pierces thumbs, too. You wince sympathetically as a portly clerk in powdered wig tries to press several tax forms together. He mutters, "Blast these things, and jabs the pin through the top corner. The paper's split. He tries again. His sleeve catches. You can almost hear the tiny scream his skin would make if paper could cry. Before paper clips became ubiquitous, pins were serious office gear. By the 1700s, English factories were churning out hand-cut steel pins in staggering numbers, tens of millions a year. These weren't just for tailoring or corsetry. Offices relied on them for organizing everything from letters to ledgers. It was a dangerous game. One wrong movement, and a neatly arranged stack could explode into chaos. You sit in the back of a dusty Prussian archive as a scholar gingerly lifts a bound document, its corners pinned by 3 rusting wires. With tweezers, he removes them like a surgeon handling ancient bones. Some things, he says softly, weren't meant to last this long. He's probably right. Many pins left ugly orange smudges, iron oxide stains that historians now loathe. A paper-saving tool becomes centuries later a destroyer of evidence. Still, people kept using them. Why? Because pins were cheap, effective, and everywhere. A full jar might cost a few pennies. You picture an 1830s London clerk late at night taking out his frustration by jabbing pins into a particularly irritating memo. Passive-aggressive, sure. Therapeutic, absolutely. Some clerks grew clever. They bent pins into gentle arcs for easier handling. Others hammered them slightly flat to reduce tearing. One German inventor even designed a specialized paper piercer, essentially a fancy nail with a handle for better grip. It never took off, but the idea lived on in the imaginations of stationery-obsessed bureaucrats. Historians still argue whether the spread of pins from domestic sewing baskets into office culture was a natural evolution or a desperate measure. Some claim it was simply convenience. When your household already had pins, why not use them for your bills? Others suspect that clerks bound by budget constraints adopted them out of necessity. Either way, they spread across Europe like a minor plague of pokey inconveniences. And let's not pretend they weren't dangerous. Office accidents involving pins were shockingly common. You find an 1894 report from Boston listing workplace injuries, and yes, pin stab appears 3 times. One clerk allegedly passed out from a minor infection. Another had to soak his thumb in iodine for a week. Side note, this man later became an early advocate for paper clasp innovation, and we can't blame him. Still, pins had a tactile elegance. There's something oddly satisfying about their weight, the gentle pressure needed to guide one through a thick sheaf of paper. It's manual, it's deliberate, and it whispers to you, I'm here because nothing else has been invented yet. In one particularly obsessive office, a London bookkeeper arranged his files with pins set at exact 45-degree angles. When questioned why, he replied, "It pleases the paper." Historians believe this might be the earliest known case of stationery-induced madness, a condition still unrecognized by modern medicine, but deeply understood by anyone who's ever spent $30 on a mechanical pencil. You hover over an 1860 Parisian notary's table. Stacks of deeds and contracts are pinned together and filed upright in open boxes. Some pins are brass, others iron. One set gleams suspiciously gold, possibly ceremonial, possibly stolen, you don't ask. The point is, they're everywhere, but they're not perfect. You can feel it now. That tension. The pin's reign is cracking. The paper age is accelerating. More mail, more bills, more bureaucracy. People need speed and safety, preferably without tetanus. Some begin experimenting. There's talk of wax tabs, wire, staples, twisted strings, even weird melted glue-on-leather hybrids. Most don't work. But then, someone somewhere in a cold northern town starts bending wire. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. For now, you rest your eyes on a wooden box labeled Important Correspondence. Inside, 20 pin-stabbed letters curl gently like leaves in autumn. You run your fingers over their ragged corners. You feel the echoes of a million tiny pokes, the unsung pain of clerical progress. And with that, you blow gently across the desk and watch as one final pin rolls slowly to the floor. You turn the page figuratively and literally, and suddenly you're knee-deep in the glorious mess that was 19th century paperwork. It's louder than you expected. A symphony of rustling, flipping, folding, and muttering fills the air. The room smells like stale ink, damp wool coats, and something faintly metallic, perhaps the cold scent of brass. You're in the middle of a bustling Victorian office, and let's just say Marie Kondo would have fainted on sight. Victorian paperwork was not elegant. It was chaotic, creative, and wildly inconsistent. And for a few unlucky decades, it got worse before it got better. The filing systems invented on the fly. You lean over one desk to find strings tied in elaborate sailor knots, keeping invoices together. Next to it, another clerk has bundled his files with waxy cloth tape, crisscrossed like a tiny corset. And on the far end, a man desperately trying to thread a dull needle through 3 thick account books like it's the world's saddest embroidery class. You lift a ledger. It weighs nearly 10 pounds. The paper is heavy, the ink smudged the corners. Dog-eared, and weight is that bacon grease, possibly. You decide not to investigate further. Here, paperwork wasn't just paper. It was an architectural experience. Towers of files leaned like Pisa. Ledger stacks teetered on uneven floors. One sneeze could bring down a month's worth of billing records. A particularly energetic sneeze could take down Q1 and Q2. It's no surprise that fasteners began to multiply. Brass paper fasteners, those split-prong little devils, make their first appearance around now. You watch a young woman punch a tiny hole in her report, slip the fastener through, and press the legs flat with a thimble. Voila, secured. Sort of. But they only worked with holes punched in advance. No punch, no luck. And they were fussy. Too many pages, and the prongs bent. Too few, and they spun in place like confused compass needles. Historians still argue whether this fastener craze started in England or the U.S., Some credit American school administrators who needed to keep test sheets together. Others point to government accountants who were drowning in receipts. Either way, a new paper anchoring trend was born. And what a variety of inventions it spawned. You stumble upon a dusty drawer labeled miscellaneous office devices, and inside is an entire museum of forgotten solutions. The Tucket Tab TM spoiler it didn't. The crescent clamp shaped like the moon held like a joke. The goosefoot gripper, don't ask. All failed in different ways. Too sharp, too fragile, too complicated. One had 12 separate parts. Another required an instruction manual. One came with a tiny rubber hammer. But here's the thing, people kept trying. The very chaos of paper demanded invention. Some of the solutions worked for a time. Paper spikes became popular. You see a long metal rod mounted on a wooden base like a dangerous unicorn horn, and clerks shoving completed memos onto it with alarming speed. A slow day's paperwork might stack 2 inches high. A busy one nearly impaled the ceiling. Still, nothing was universal. Every office had its own approach. One London firm arranged files in sandwich-like packets bound with ribbon and labeled in Latin. In New York, insurance agents kept everything in manila envelopes, sealed with wax requiring a penknife to open. And yes, they often sliced the documents inside. In India, British colonial officers used string-tied files that looked more like ancient scrolls than modern records. You walk past a desk where a man is folding a document, accordion style, then wrapping it with twine. Keeps the snakes out, he says flatly. You don't ask questions, you just nod. And amidst all this, something very human begins to emerge, a love-hate relationship with paper. People start designing their desks around their documents, special trays, miniature shelves, letter slots. One Parisian accountant had a rolling cabinet with 40 drawers each for a different client. When he died, nobody could find his will. It was in drawer 39, misfiled under W for wages. It's not that these clerks were sloppy. Quite the opposite. They were overwhelmed. The industrial age brought floods of information. Factories, trade deals, taxes, telegraphs. Every advancement meant more documentation, more memos, more forms, more beautiful, maddening, irreplaceable paper. And the office. It became a kind of battlefield, a war of organization, a fight for space. And fasteners were the weapons, except they all jammed. You hear it now, the creak of a brass clamp as it's forced over one too many sheets. The snap of ribbon stretched too tight. The sigh of a clerk realizing she just sealed the wrong document inside the wrong packet again. And in the middle of this paper hurricane, a quiet need begins to form for something universal, something reusable, something simple, something that doesn't require punching, folding, taping, burning, tying, or bleeding. Just one tiny twist of metal. That's all anyone wanted. But nobody's invented it yet, not quite. So you lean back in your creaky chair, look at the tangle of strings clips, wax and brass on your desk, and whisper to yourself, there has to be a better way. You open your eyes to a cold Scandinavian morning. Snow drifts lazily past the window. Somewhere a kettle hisses. And in a small, quiet room in Oslo, a man named Johan Faller is fiddling with a piece of wire. You watch him carefully. He's not in a lab, not wearing a lab coat. He's not even a full-time inventor. He's a patent clerk, ironic in hindsight. And yet today, something is stirring in his fingertips. A gentle bend, a careful loop, a second curve that mirrors the first. What he holds in his hand doesn't seem like much. Just a piece of drawn steel wire, shaped into a loose double oval. But it's more than that. It's potential. It's quiet genius. It's the first recorded attempt at something the world didn't know it desperately needed, the modern paperclip. You lean closer as he lines up 2 sheets of paper, and slides his new invention onto the corner. The pages cling together like old friends. No stabbing, no glue, no ribbon, no strings. Just tension, just pressure. It works. It works. And nobody notices. You probably thought this would be a triumphant moment, right? Applause headlines. A brass bust of Waller in Oslo's central square. Nope. What Johann gets is silence. He submits a patent in Germany in 1899. It gets approved. The design is technically novel, if slightly clunkier than what you're used to. But it's enough. He's proud. He waits for the orders, the licensing, the letter of interest from every stationery supplier in Europe. Crickets. Turns out a British company, Gem Manufacturing Liewidi, had quietly beaten him to it without a patent. Their version of the clip was sleeker, tighter, more practical. They didn't claim credit. They didn't need to. The product spread on its own like paper viruses finding their cure. By the time Weiler's patent was filed, Gem's clips were already on desks across London. Historians still argue whether Weiler's design was truly original or just a parallel evolution. Some say he was inspired by an earlier wire bookmark design. Others insist his was the first true clip in spirit, if not in form. Either way, the name paperclip would never carry his name. You feel a twinge of sympathy as he returns to his desk. Another idea lost to history's filing cabinet. But the Gem clip, that's where the real magic starts. Around 1890, Gem Manufacturing began quietly producing these little marvels. Simple loops of wire bent in such a way that they used friction and pressure to hold paper without piercing or gluing it. It had no moving parts, no instructions, no need for holes or tape or string, just slide press and forget. It was elegant, it was democratic, and it spread. You hold one between your fingers, light, almost nothing. And yet in that moment, you realize this might be the single most successful, unpatented design of the modern age. By 1900, they were everywhere in schools, law offices, universities. You watch a professor at Oxford use one to mark his spot in a thick Latin grammar text. A banker in Berlin clips together 5 bills of exchange. A secretary in Boston hums a tune as she slides a clip onto a carbon copy. Each clip hums softly against the paper like a little thank you. And still, no name. The earliest advertisements simply called them gem clips. That was it. No backstory, no inventor's monologue. Just function. But in the shadow of that success, you see a trail of forgotten inventors, each one trying their own twist. Quite literally. Between 1890 and 1920, over 50 different paperclip designs were patented in the U.S. alone. Some looked like spirals, others resembled figure eights. One even had serrated edges, aggressive little gremlins ready to chew your report. None stuck. The Gem outperformed them all. Its secret wasn't complexity, it was simplicity. One wire, one curve, no frills, no fuss. And yet Weiler's version refused to disappear completely. In fact, decades later, during World War II, it would take on a strange and powerful second life. But that's a story for another night. Tonight, you simply marvel at the quiet birth of a revolution. A single clip now multiplied into billions. You imagine every one of them stacked end to end, forming a shimmering chain that circles the globe, holding together love letters, top-secret memos, bad poetry, forgotten receipts, keeping our chaos in check, one gentle bend at a time. You place the clip back on the desk. The paper stays together. The world stays together. You linger in the quiet afterglow of Johann Waller's humble invention, but something's brewing in the background, a storm of patent's pride and petty paperwork drama. Yes, it's time for the paperclip's most unexpected twist, the great battles of the bent wire. You step into a U.S. patent office at the dawn of the 20th century. The lighting is poor, The air smells like dust, ink, and ambition. And at every desk, someone is sketching a wire loop. It seems like everyone and their uncle wants to reinvent the paperclip. The success of the gem clip, a design too perfect to be improved, yet maddeningly unpatented, has triggered an industrial gold rush. The question on every inventor's lips: how many different ways can you bend a wire and still call it new? Apparently quite a few. You peer over the shoulder of one earnest gentleman as he sketches what looks like a tiny trombone. It grips better, he mutters, adds torque. You nod politely, even though it probably doesn't. Another man presents a bizarre, double spiral contraption with a hook on the end. Multi-grip technology, he says with a grin. You try it. It immediately punctures the paper. You hand it back without a word. By 1907, the U.S. Patent Office is swamped with over 60 paperclip designs. Most of them never see production. A few survive long enough to earn nicknames: the Owl, the Niagara, the Gothic Arch. Some are clearly invented by engineers, others by masochists. You chuckle as you test the clipper clip, a rectangular clamp with a tension spring that requires two hands and possibly a minor prayer to operate. It's ridiculous. It's beautiful. It's completely impractical. Historians still argue whether these attempts were genuine efforts to improve office life or just creative tax write-offs. Some scholars point to a paperclip bubble, a flurry of speculative investment in novelty stationery. Others think it was simply an age of tinkering, where even the most trivial objects felt worthy of reinvention. But you know what's really going on. Jealousy. See, the gem clip, despite being simple and effective, didn't belong to anyone. It wasn't patented. There was no royalty, no empire. That drove inventors mad. They didn't just want a clip, they wanted to own the clip, to be the clip person, to have their name etched forever on desk drawers and pencil holders around the world. So they twisted, they coiled, they filed applications with hopeful names: improved sheet fastener, spring tension binder, document grip mechanism, and still the world kept reaching for the original gem. You step into a Boston law firm circa 1912. On one desk sits a pile of rejected clip prototypes. Nearby, a secretary quietly uses a gem clip to organize the contracts. Nobody's watching, nobody's judging. She just knows it works. In the background office, supply catalogs from this era become increasingly breathless in their copy. One declares, "Revolutionize your file room with our patented triple twist clutch." Another promises, "No more paper slippage, guaranteed by science." You roll your eyes gently. Marketing has always had a flair for desperation. Yet something else is happening too. Something deeper. For the first time, the very concept of small design is becoming serious business. Designers start thinking about ergonomics, user habits, storage systems. The paperclip is no longer just a wire, it's a signal, a symbol. The line between engineering and aesthetics is beginning to blur. One young designer in Chicago files a patent for a clip shaped like a perfect ellipse. It mirrors the shape of the human eye, he explains earnestly. It fails commercially, but his idea form-matching function echoes into the future. And then, like a thread through fabric, the war arrives. World War I erupts, and with it a shift in priorities. Steel is rationed. Factories retool. Paperclips take a back seat to bullets, but they never disappear. In field offices and supply stations, clerks still use them bent, rusty, precious, a small luxury in the midst of chaos. You follow one such clip as it travels in a soldier's pack across Europe, pinning together letters from home. It's bent, dulled, barely hanging on. But it stays. It endures. By the 1920s, the gem clip returns stronger than ever. now manufactured by dozens of firms across Europe and America. The name becomes generic. It's the paperclip, undefeated, unchallenged, quietly victorious. And yet, Wahler's design still lingers like a forgotten twin. Somewhere in a Norwegian drawer, his patent gathers dust. He never sees a dime, never gets a parade. But in the margins of history, his bent wire still pulses. You lean back in your chair, fingertips brushing a small tin of paper clips. You pick one up. It feels ordinary. It feels perfect. And suddenly you realize how strange it is that the most successful invention in this story is also the one nobody ever got to truly own. It belonged to all of us. You wake to a darker scene now, clouds over Europe, boots in the streets, typewriters, clattering out orders in languages no one wants to hear again. It's World War II, and strangely, paper clips are about to become something more than stationery. You're in Oslo again, decades after Wahler's quiet patent faded into bureaucracy's back drawer. But now Norway is under Nazi occupation, and the people pressed silent by propaganda and threats are finding new ways to speak. Enter the paperclip. Small, silent, seemingly innocent. It starts slowly. One person pins a paper clip to their lapel, another to their hat. Soon thousands of Norwegians are wearing them, men, women, even children. Why? Because the occupiers have banned all overt displays of national unity. No flags, no slogans, no gatherings. But a paperclip. A paperclip says, "I'm holding us together." You walk down a cobbled street and notice them little glints of defiance on coat collars and scarves. It's subtle. Too subtle for the Gestapo at first, but then they notice the pattern, the quiet coordination, and the paperclip becomes illegal. You feel a rush of disbelief. This tiny twist of wire, barely worth a thought in peacetime, has transformed into a symbol of resistance. You think back to Wahler, long dead by now. He never imagined this. Nobody did. Historians still argue whether the paperclip resistance was truly spontaneous or whether it was orchestrated by underground networks. Some claim school teachers began it, others point to student groups or even postal workers, but no one can deny its spread or its power. By 1941, wearing a paperclip could get you arrested. Some did, others disappeared. Still, the clips persisted. In one story, perhaps true, perhaps folklore, a factory worker was ordered to remove the clip from his lapel. He did silently, then picked up a bent nail from the floor and pinned that on instead. You can't help but smile. It's no longer just about holding paper. It's about holding dignity. You glance at the bureaucratic irony. The very symbol of administrative control files, Memo's rules, has flipped into a silent middle finger to authority. You imagine a Nazi officer furiously writing a report, held together by a Norwegian-made paperclip. And it gets stranger. Decades later, a teacher in Tennessee stumbles upon this forgotten history. She and her students decide to honor it in a tangible way. They launch the Paper Clips Project, collecting millions of clips to represent lives lost in the Holocaust. At first, it seems like a small gesture, a class project. But the world notices. Clips arrive by mail from every state, every continent, from schoolchildren, survivors, politicians. A small American town ends up with over 30 million paper clips, each one symbolizing a life, a memory, a reminder. The display becomes a permanent memorial. An old German rail car filled with paper clips now stands as a haunting tribute, one of the most quietly moving memorials you'll ever visit. You stare at those clips, piled like silver leaves, each one small, fragile, replaceable, and yet together immense. And here you are on this strange journey. You thought this would be a story about paperwork, filing, office supplies, but now you understand. The paper clip was never just about paper. It was about order and chaos, about unity, about resistance, and oddly enough, about memory. You sit with that for a while, let it settle in. The next time you pick up a clip, idly twisting it while daydreaming or slipping it onto a to-do list, you might feel that quiet weight, that history humming through the wire, that absurd little object that once stood for hope, and you wonder what else have we overlooked. You drift forward again out of wartime shadows and into the whirring clatter of mid-century modernity. The war is over. The desks are reorganized. The paperwork resumes louder and more demanding than ever. And now something heavier lands on your desk with a dull metallic thunk. Ah, yes, the stapler has arrived. You stare at it like it's an alien artifact. Sleek, mechanical, slightly menacing. A small beast in office form. It hisses when used. It jams when overfed. And it always demands respect. Welcome to the age of Badiam, the stapler empire. You pick it up. It's cold and heavy, probably enough to knock someone unconscious, purely hypothetically, of course. The early models were built like industrial machines. Some weighed several pounds and required both hands to operate. They didn't just fasten papers, they punched them together like a factory press stamping steel. You step into a 1950s insurance firm where rows of clerks line up their forms with almost religious precision. One man gently taps the edge of his stack on the desk 3 times, tap, 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 before lowering the stapler like a guillotine. Chuck-chunk. Success. The papers stay. He exhaled. The first modern stapler, you learn, dates back to the late 19th century. George W. McGill patented a version of it in the 1860s, and it slowly evolved from curious novelty to desk mainstay. Early staplers weren't quite staples. As we know them, they often used pre-cut strips of metal bent by the device itself. Complicated, unreliable, expensive. But the post-war boom changes that. Suddenly, offices are everywhere. Paper flows like a flood, and the stapler becomes essential, an everyday hammer in the bureaucracy's toolbox. You spot a 1953 advertisement, one press, and your documents are secure for life. It sounds vaguely threatening, but effective. Historians still argue whether the rise of the stapler was driven more by office efficiency or by post-war industrial surplus. Some say manufacturers simply needed new markets for leftover metal. Others believe it was part of a broader push toward mechanization of everything, even paper organization. Still, as you roam through rows of gray desks and beige filing cabinets, one thing becomes clear: the stapler may be efficient, but it is not elegant. You watch a secretary in Cincinnati jam her swing line for the 4th time in an hour. She bangs it on the desk, muttering darkly. A co-worker offers unsolicited advice. She ignores him. The paperclip in its quiet corner smirks. There's something visceral about a stapler. The loud thunk. The tiny bend of steel, the sense of finality. Once a page is stapled, it is decided. No wiggling it back out, no gentle undoing. You need tools or violence to reverse the action. The paperclip whispers. The stapler commands. Still, staplers evolve. In the 60s and 70s, they get lighter, sleeker, more colorful. Plastic enters the scene. A red stapler appears, yes, that. Red stapler forever immortalized in cinema decades later. You know the one. But even with its muscle, and might the stapler doesn't replace the paperclip. Instead, they form a quiet alliance, a yin and yang of paperwork, one temporary, one permanent, one flexible, one forceful, each with its own purpose, its own flavor of power. And then there's the subculture. You walk into a late-night office and find a clerk carefully building a model Eiffel Tower entirely out of staples. Across the room, someone else is chain-linking paper clips into a necklace. Office supplies have become toys. Art, distractions. Their fates forever entwined with human boredom. In Japan, you find a bizarrely elegant solution, the stapleless stapler. It punches a tiny slit and folds the paper back into itself like some kind of origami hug. It's adorable. It's ineffective. It's sold in thousands. Meanwhile, back in America, the Swingline 747 becomes the gold standard. You hear the name whispered in reverence by supply managers. It's heavy, durable, honest. If staplers had a godfather, this would be it. You try it once. Chunk-chunk. Satisfying. You smile. And as you slide the newly stapled stack into your folder, you realize something. Every paper fastener tells a story of office hierarchy, of human impatience, of quiet revolutions in miniature. From the gentle clasp of a clip to the firm finality of a staple, you're watching the battle for paperwork control unfold in slow metallic poetry. And tonight, you're just along for the ride. You rub your eyes, and now you're standing before a towering filing cabinet, metal gray, humming with secrets. Welcome to the next phase in your paper, Odyssey, folders, files, and fool's cap frustration. Let's start with the obvious question. Why does paper come in so many sizes? You sift through stacks of documents marked legal letter, A4 foolscap. Your hands tremble slightly as you try to cram a long, awkward British tax form into a slightly too short manila folder. It crumples. You sigh. Somewhere across time and space, a bureaucrat chuckles. Foolscap paper, that extra-long oddity with the regal-sounding name, was once the standard in the British Empire. Its name a nod to the watermark of a jester's cap on early handmade sheets. The irony is not lost on you. Nothing says serious documentation like a jester dancing in the corner of your will. You follow its trail through colonial offices and dusty courtrooms where clerks spent their lives folding it precisely into narrow leather-bound files. And when the world shifted toward shorter letter-size paper in the mid-20th century, foolscap resisted, especially in the Commonwealth. It clung on like a ghost in government drawers, slightly too long, slightly too proud. Historians still argue whether foolscap's longevity was due to bureaucratic stubbornness or actual utility. Some claim it allowed more writing per page, saving money. Others believe it was a kind of administrative inertia. Changing the standard meant reprinting every form, retraining every secretary, and replacing every folder. And those folders, yes, the glorious invention of the manila folder, a tan rectangle of hope and false security. Manila hemp, sourced from the Philippines, gave it strength, and its signature muted color. You hold one now? It flaps open like a sad butterfly. Documents slide into it with a soft shush. You almost feel organized. But then you look again. There's no binding, no clip, no label, just paper hiding inside paper, the illusion of order. You glance sideways at its chaotic cousin, the accordion file. Pleated expandable and prone to bursting at the seams, it resembles a paper-themed jack-in-the-box. You try to pull out one form and accidentally extract 5. The entire contents shift yawning like a tired beast. And don't even get started on hang and file. You open a drawer and hear the telltale clink of metal hooks. They're like tiny hammocks for documents neat suspended and entirely dependent on precise alignment. One mishooked file. The whole drawer jams. You've entered a world where chaos hides under the illusion of straight lines. Still, there's something satisfying here. The quiet rhythm of label makers clicking out names. The gentle snick of folders sliding in and out. The soft, satisfying sound of your own system working. You peek into a 1970s City Hall office. A file clerk, middle-aged, weary, but proud, has developed her own color-coded method: blue folders for taxes, red for licenses, green for letters. Her drawers are pristine, her labels handwritten in curling script. She could probably find your birth certificate in the dark. She glances up, frowns slightly, and adjusts the edge of a folder by 1 millimeter. Perfect. But even she, goddess of the files, is not immune to disaster. Her folder tabs warp in humidity. Her file labels fade. And someone from accounting always puts things back in the wrong spot. Because human error eternal. Still, people cling to folders. Why? Because they represent possibility, the illusion of control, a small, satisfying rectangle of boundaries in a world filled with entropy. Slide your tax return into a manila folder, and it feels handled even if it's full of mistakes. You walk now into a modern office supply store. The folder aisle is absurd. Plastic folders, leather folders, folders with glitter, tabs, flaps, built-in calculators. Some are waterproof, some are fireproof. One has a USB port. And yet somehow none of them actually improve your ability to find anything. Because ultimately folders are just soft little fences around your paper chaos. They don't solve the mess. They just delay it. But you're okay with that. You cradle one in your arms, smooth, creased, trustworthy, and you remember that sometimes pretending you're organized is half the battle. So you place the folder carefully into your cabinet. The drawer slides shut with a satisfying thunk. For now, the paper sleeps, and so do you. You wake to a strange scent, sharp, sweet, unmistakable. Purple ink. You're in a mid-century classroom somewhere in the 1950s. The air is thick with the smell of carbon copies and mimeographs, and it's more intoxicating than you'd care to admit. You take a seat at a wooden desk. A teacher hands you a freshly run-off worksheet, still warm, still damp, still stinking of alcohol-based duplicator fluid. You hold it close, maybe too close. You know the drill. Everyone does. There's a reason mimeograph paper has a fan base. The mimeograph, also affectionately called the ditto machine, was once the beating heart of paper duplication. Before photocopiers, before PDFs, this was how you got dozens of documents out of one draft. It involved wax stencils, rollers, and the kind of mechanical clunk that made the whole office vibrate. You watch it in action. A secretary feeds the master stencil into the drum, cranks the handle, and each sheet pops out with blurry purple ink. It's messy. It's imperfect. It's beautiful. Historians still argue whether the mimeograph was more revolutionary than Gutenberg's press for offices, at least. Some say it democratized information. Others say it just made it easier to lose control of paperwork. One crank of the handle too far, and you've got 150 pages of your dentist's lunch order. You pick up a few of the sheets, the ink smears. The text is fuzzy, but you can still read it. Sort of. Your eyes adjust to the bleeding edges. Everyone's did. For decades, this was how memos moved. School notices, church bulletins, riot pamphlets, detention slips, all purple, all strangely scented. But the mimeograph wasn't alone. Beside it sits its quieter cousin. The carbon copy. Carbon paper, thin, inky, temperamental. You shudder slightly as you remember using it. Place it between two sheets, apply pressure, and hope your handwriting doesn't betray you. Carbon copies were unforgiving. One shaky E, and the ghost of it would haunt the bottom page forever. You follow a clerk in 1947 as she prepares a triplicate order form. Original on top carbon paper sandwiched between yellow duplicate below. She aligns it carefully, types with precision, K-chunk. K-chunk. Every key strikes through 3 layers of time. Then the dreaded moment she checks the bottom copy. It's crooked. Half the numbers are missing. She sighs. rips it out, starts again. This was the burden of paperwork in the age before digital error correction. Mistakes weren't just annoying, they were permanent. Ink couldn't be undone, typos lived on. Still, the carbon copy had its place. It allowed for archiving, for proof, for redundancy. You think of all the layers, triplicates filed away in dusty cabinets, waiting to defend someone's innocence or confirm an overdue fine. You open a box marked Correspondence, 1959. Inside are hundreds of carbon-backed letters typed in perfect rhythm. Some still smell faintly of machine oil. One contains a love confession accidentally carboned into a company invoice. Another is a resignation letter sent to the wrong office by mistake. History, it turns out, is layered in every sense. And of course, human nature, being what it is, people tried to game the system. You find a note. Don't press too hard, carbon copy will show. A child's scrawled answer sheet lies underneath the cheating, exposed in faint gray lines on the back page. But not all was functional. Some carbon copies became art. You stumble upon a collection of carbon-pressed poetry, delicate fading, nearly translucent. The poet didn't save the originals. Only the ghosts remain. Paper souls. And as for the machines, oh, they age poorly. You glance at a retired mimeograph in a school basement. Dusty, crankless, forgotten, its drum frozen with time. Nobody mourns its passing, not really. But you place a hand on its frame. For a moment, you think you smell the ink again. Of course, all of this eventually gave way to photocopiers. Sleek, brutal humming monsters with their own demands. Paper in, copies out. Sometimes, if you were lucky, if you knew its mood. But that's another story. Tonight, you're focused on the purple ghosts, the ink-smudged duplicates, the carbon-scarred forms. They were messy, imperfect, and somehow deeply human. You think about the physicality of them, the way paper layers held time, the way information duplicated itself not by code or cloud, but by sheer pressure, mechanical memory. And as you stack a few crooked pages back into their file, you realize something. In those old forms and clunky stencils, we weren't just replicating documents. We were replicating belief. In permanence, in process, in doing it right even if it took 5 tries and smelled like a chemistry experiment. You slide the drawer closed. The papers crinkle softly in the dark. You stretch your arms, and now you're in a space that feels oddly familiar. An office, yes, but different. Warmer, brighter, more colorful. Welcome to the golden age of desk clutter. Post-its, punched cards, and paper hunger. Your eyes scan the walls first. They're covered in fluttering yellow notes, some fresh, some faded, some curled like dried petals. Each one is a whisper. Call Carol. TPS report by 3. Don't microwave the fish. It's chaos. Yes, but charming chaos. The post-it note, like many great inventions, was an accident. In the late 1960s, a scientist at 3M named Spencer Silver developed a weak adhesive, so weak it wouldn't hold anything down permanently. Useless, right? Not to Art Fry. Art, a choir singer by night and engineer by day, had a recurring problem. His bookmarks kept falling out of his hymnal. One day he dabbed some of Silver's sticky glue on a scrap of paper, and boom, a miracle. Temporary adhesion, repositionable notes, modern hieroglyphs. You walk past his old desk in your imagination. Neat rows of yellow squares, handwritten in blocky ink. Don't forget the meeting. Buy cat litter. Reminder you exist. Historians still argue whether the post-it note is more product or phenomenon. Some credit it with launching the visual thinking movement. Others say it's the world's most expensive to-do list. Either way, it caught fire. In homes, offices, dorm rooms, detective shows. By the late 80s, Post-its were everywhere like butterflies made of anxiety. But let's step back a moment, because just before this sticky revolution, something stranger was holding the world together: punched cards. You pick one up, rectangular, cream-colored, riddled with small square holes. It looks like a weird train ticket, or the most boring fortune cookie ever. But these, friend, were the backbone of early data. Punched cards, first developed in the 19th century for textile looms, were adopted by computing pioneers like Herman Hollerith, whose 1890 U.S. census system used them to tabulate data. Each hole was a 1, each blank space a 0, the birth of binary written in cardboard. You follow a technician through an early IBM facility. She holds a stack of cards so thick it could stop a bullet. One dropped card, disaster. Entire programs lost in a shuffle. She's careful, reverent. You watch her feed them into a machine. Whir. Chunk, chunk, chunk. Outcomes: a payroll. Incredible. Punched cards weren't just for computers. Some bureaucracies used them for filing systems, inventory, even voter registration. They were physical, fragile spreadsheets, susceptible to coffee spills, paper jams, and cats. And yet they worked. Until they didn't. By the 1980s, punched cards faded, replaced by floppy disks, magnetic tape, glowing green text on CRT monitors. But their spirit, the desire to structure chaos, never left. And neither did our obsession with more paper. Because despite every advance, typewriters, carbon copies, punched cards, digital backups, paper wasn't going anywhere. It multiplied, mutated. You open a drawer, it's full. You open another, full. There's a third drawer. It screams. This is how paper hunger. The endless human urge to produce duplicate archive just in case. Reports nobody reads, memos nobody remembers, manuals for printers that stopped working during the last administration. Paper as proof, paper as permanence, paper as a nervous tick. You walk into a marketing office circa 994. Every desk is wallpapered with printouts. The recycling bin overflows with final drafts. A man stands at the copier, watching as it spits out 200 copies of a memo that literally says, "Please don't waste paper." You say nothing. And yet amid the absurdity, there's something comforting here. The sound of a highlighter swiping across text. The flick of a sticky note. The heft of a 3-ring binder. Paper may be heavy, wasteful, inefficient, but it's real. You can touch it, crumple it, burn it if you're feeling dramatic. In this section of history, office life isn't just about function, it's about ritual. You write the note, you stick it to the monitor, you ignore it for 6 days, you finally do the task, you rip the note off with triumph, a tiny, stupid victory. You smile, and then you write another one. Because let's face it, we're not done with paper yet, not even close. You stretch your legs only to find them tangled in cords, not vines, not shoelaces, cords, coiled printer cables, power bricks, a lonely USB dangling off the edge of a desk like it's contemplating its choices. You've entered the transitional territory, digital dreams versus paper realities. It's the early 1990s now. Offices buzz not with chatter, but with the slow wheeze of computers waking up. Beige monitors flicker on. Floppy disks click into place. The future has arrived, and it's kind of awkward. You sit in front of an IBM PC with a glowing green screen. The mouse has a ball in it. The keyboard weighs as much as a toddler. Your heart says finally paperless, but your desk says otherwise. Because the dream of a paperless office, it's a lie. A hopeful, shimmering mirage floating over a landfill of spreadsheets. The irony hits you immediately. Every digital breakthrough creates more paper, not less. Need to edit a document, print it. Want to share a report, print too. Email someone a file. Sure. but also fax them. And just to be safe, print a backup. You stand next to the copier, watching 36 versions of the same 12-page document fly into the output tray. You stare at the stack. You whisper, "I will not waste paper." And then you make one more copy, just in case. Historians still argue whether the digital revolution actually increased paper usage in the late 20th century. Some studies suggest it did. Others blame poor training software glitches and deep-seated human mistrust of screens. All agree on one thing: the laser printer did not help. You meet it now, standing proud in the corner of the office like a boxy god of judgment. The HP LaserJet D2. You feed it a document. It hums ominously, prints half a page, then freezes. Its little LCD reads error 52. You stare into its soul. It stares back. Next to it, the dot matrix printer groans to life. A slow chattering sound like an insect playing the drums. You pull the page out with its perforated edges and feel satisfied. The tactile reality of information made physical. Yet even now, the paper's fighting back. Mismatched fonts, garbled print jobs, missing staples. You try to make labels for your folders only to discover the label sheet is upside down. You print it again and again. You end up with 14 sheets of empty sticker paper and a strong urge to scream. Still, there's hope. Word processors, Excel, email, glorious paper-free communication. Except not everyone trusts it. You overhear an HR manager mutter, "If it's not on paper, it doesn't exist." She prints every single email, then files them in color-coded binders. Her office is slowly turning into a tree's revenge. The floppy disk enters your line of sight, a cute little square that holds 1.44 megabytes. You do the math, not even one high-resolution image, but back then, that was power. Files lived and died by that plastic wafer. You find one labeled Payroll Backup, 1998. You're afraid to open it. Meanwhile, office workers start developing a strange new behavior, clicking Print Preview 15 times before sending anything to the printer. And yet, still printing it wrong. You spot a whiteboard in the conference room. Going Paperless, Our Vision for 2001. Below it, tacked to the wall, is a 9-page printed memo explaining the plan. You chuckle. Because despite all the dreams, the reality remains humans like paper. It's stable. It doesn't crash. It doesn't need charging. You can doodle on it, tear it, fold it into a frog, burn it when the meeting goes badly. And so the paperless office becomes the unicorn of corporate folklore. Talked about, idealized, never actually seen. But something does change. You begin to notice hybrid systems, electronic records backed by hard copies, paper forms with barcodes, contracts signed digitally but still printed for the real file. Paper isn't gone, it's just adapting, learning to live with its digital roommate. And that friction, it's oddly poetic. The future promised us floating screens and voice commands. Instead, we got e-signature, PDFs printed, scanned, and reprinted just to be sure. We got employees printing Google Docs for easier reading. We got the cloud. And then we backed it up on paper. So tonight, as you power down the computer, you look at the printer one last time. It's blinking, not working, but it's trying. And on your desk, a sticky note, a folder, a printed slide deck, paper refusing to go quietly. You smile. You pick up the pen. You write something down, just in case. You shift your gaze and land on something humble, almost apologetic in the corner of the desk, a black metal clip with silver arms. No curves, no gimmicks, just steel folded into a quiet V, and you recognize it instantly. The unbinder clip. You pick it up, squeeze the arms. It opens with a soft snap. You release it. The jaws bite shut, firm, secure. There's something immensely satisfying about the precision of it. No teeth, no puncture, just raw holding power. Tonight we honor this quiet titan, the tinny metal superhero of the modern desk. The binder clip, believe it or not, didn't appear until the 1910s. It was invented by Louis Baltzley, a man who simply wanted to help his writer father keep manuscripts together without punching holes. The first version was almost identical to what you hold now, because, well, it was already perfect. Historians still argue whether Baltzley's clip was truly revolutionary or just a clever twist on earlier clamps. But no one debates its legacy. Today, it's in every drawer on every desk, holding everything from legal documents to broken sandals. Yes, people have used them as makeshift fashion accessories. No judgment here. You follow a trail of binder clips across history, into courtrooms, into classrooms, into chaotic kitchens. It transcends industries. Its uses multiply like an inside joke shared among office workers everywhere. You sit beside a law clerk in 1967. She binds a 3-inch stack of affidavits with one clip. It groans but holds. A single document slips, she readjusts. It's like watching a surgeon work. The beauty of the binder clip isn't just its strength, it's its versatility. You see one used as a money clip, another as a chip bag sealer. One holds up a wedding veil during a dress emergency. Another props up a cell phone. And in the distant future, someone will use it to fix a spaceship panel. Probably. You step into a supply room in 1982. There's a whole bin labeled Binder Clips Large. Beside it, Binder Clips Medium. And of course, the elusive Binder Clips Mini, the Holy Trinity. It's like a sacred shrine. And then there are the mods. You watch as an engineer unbends the arms to create a phone stand. A designer turns 6 clips into a cable manager. A college student builds a tiny catapult using 2 clips, a rubber band, and dreams. These aren't just clips anymore. They're tools. They're survival gear. In the right hands, they're art. But don't be fooled. The binder clip isn't flashy. It doesn't ask for attention. It sits quietly in a drawer waiting. Unlike the stapler, it doesn't scar the page. Unlike the paper clip, it doesn't slip. It grips like a handshake you can trust. You imagine a paper-based apocalypse. Systems failing, chaos rising, pages flying. And somewhere in the ruins, the last binder clip still holds 2 sheets together saying, "Not on my watch." Even the design is genius. The wings fold down, lie flat, and politely get out of your way. No other fastener bows this gracefully. It's a little nod of respect from tool to human. And let's not forget the sound, that quiet, tinny ping as you let go, that tiny snap that says, "Mission accomplished." There's an ASMR universe hiding inside every binder clip. You pick one up again, feel the resistance, the satisfaction of the release, the low-tech miracle of leverage and folded steel. They've barely changed in over 100 years. And why would they? What else do you need? It's a marvel of minimalist design, nothing extra, nothing wasted. Just efficiency, tension, and a bit of spring-loaded love. And in a world obsessed with apps and upgrades, that's a rare thing. You place the binder clip on your stack of papers. It clamps down. The papers align. The desk is quieter. Somewhere Baltzley smiles. You turn slowly, now drawn by a strange magnetic pull metal, on metal drawers on runners. You've arrived at the monolith of the modern paper world, the Baum filing cabinet. Mwonks. It's a beast. 4 drawers high, industrial gray. The surface is dented, the labels faded, but you can sense the weight of what lives inside. Secrets, stories, receipts, love letters, lawsuits, recipes, and at least one employee's emergency candy stash. You grip the cold handle of the top drawer. It resists. then slides open with a groan like a whale sighing. Inside, hanging folders stretching back decades. Some are crisp, others slump like tired shoulders. You've entered a steel forest, and every leaf is a document. The filing cabinet first emerged in the late 19th century, part of a wave of business efficiency mania. Prior to that, papers were stacked flat or tied in bundles, which, as we've learned, was more organized chaos than actual system. The vertical file changed that. It allowed standing storage, easier access, better use of space, and a comforting thud when drawers shut. You could now file by name date. Project disaster. Toi. The modern office was born. Historians still argue whether filing systems spread because of improved literacy or rising paranoia. After all, the more you document, the more you must document. A single report leads to a memo, which leads to a response, which leads to a signed copy, which you file. You peer into one cabinet marked Miss, 1987. Inside a tax form, a note reading Call Susan, and a crayon drawing of a dinosaur. You feel like an archaeologist discovering civilization through scraps. Some files are pristine, tabbed, color-coded, alphabetical. Others are wild handwritten dividers, folders, bulging with years of untrimmed hoarding. One folder simply reads, "In case." You don't ask? Filing cabinets, you realize, aren't just tools. They're temples of paper memory. In one folder, you find decades of employee evaluations. Another contains a hand-typed Cold War emergency protocol. One drawer, jammed shut, holds a century of birthdays, bankruptcies, budgets. And like all shrines, they hold relics. A pressed flower in a legal envelope. A sticky note with a grocery list from 1992. A Polaroid of someone's cat clipped to a handwritten letter of resignation. There's romance here in the saddest way. These cabinets were never meant to be time capsules, but they became that. Not because of nostalgia, but because nobody wanted to clean them out. You remember your own filing cabinet back in some half-forgotten room. The bottom drawer always stuck. The folders smelled faintly of dust and ink. Every time you opened it, you felt like you were doing something important. Filing was more than archiving. It was control. A way to make sense of the flood. To say, yes, this belongs somewhere. It was a human attempt to outsmart entropy. A bet against chaos. And yet, so often the labels were wrong. The files misfiled. The systems abandoned. But still, we kept them. You find a drawer filled entirely with forms no one remembers needing. Travel requests, reimbursement vouchers, mimeographed bulletins. They haven't been touched in 20 years, but someone once filed them carefully. And that matters. You sit in silence now, watching the fluorescent light glint off rows of identical cabinets. They line the walls like sentinels. In this room, paper still rules. Time is stored in folders. Bureaucracy has a heartbeat. And then you stumble across the strangest drawer of all. It's labeled wrong files. Inside are the misfits. Letters with no return address. Medical charts for someone named Dog Terry. Memos referencing events that never happen. Misfiled, maybe. Or maybe this drawer is the soul of the office where all the mistakes went to nap. You feel a deep, tender fondness for it. It's honest. Because that's the truth about filing cabinets. They never judge. They just hold. Silently. Patiently. Forever. You close the drawer gently. It latches with a satisfying click. Dust hangs in the air. A paperclip sits forgotten on the cabinet's top. You place it back inside. Everything has a place. Even if no one remembers what it was, you wander now into the strange territory where paperwork meets pleasure. Yes, tonight we tiptoe into the whimsical, the obsessive, and the gently unhinged world of office supply fetishism, mildly PG. Let's start with pens. You open a drawer, inside a pen graveyard, dried out ballpoints, clicky pens that no longer click, fancy fountain pens gifted by bosses who thought you liked to touch a class. There's even a quill pen for some reason. But amid the wreckage, one pen still writes smooth, bold, perfect. You feel a flutter of joy. This is the quiet obsession, finding the one. People don't talk about it, but they know. There's always one pen that feels just right. The weight, the glide, the way it makes your handwriting look like someone else's, someone confident and organized. You guard that pen like a relic. You'd rather lend someone your car than your favorite pen. And then you find it, the drawer of delight. Sticky notes in 17 colors. Paper clips shaped like stars. Highlighters in a rainbow of anxiety. Washi tape patterned with clouds. A stapler shaped like a whale. These aren't tools. These are treasures. You step into a stationery store circa 2005. It's practically glowing. The smell of fresh paper and plastic hits you like nostalgia in a bottle. You browse slowly, touch every notebook, test every gel pen. You don't need anything, but you want everything. Historians still argue whether the rise of boutique stationery is linked to millennial burnout or just the innate human need to decorate stress. Some say we crave control. Others say we're just deeply weird. Either way, there's no denying the appeal. You find a woman organizing her label maker cartridges by font, mood, professional Gothic, gentle sans, passive-aggressive serif. Her file folders are pastel. Her drawer dividers are labeled drawer dividers. You're both intimidated and deeply impressed. You peek into a man's desk drawer organized like a survival kit. Clips by size, pens by color, a ruler, a backup ruler, 3 tiny calculators. He shows you his emergency binder ring kit and says very seriously, "You never know." You don't question it. There's comfort in this world. The order, the matching sets, the sound a new notebook makes when you crack the spine. It's like ASMR for the anxious. You walk past a cubicle where someone's built a paperclip sculpture of a giraffe. Another has replaced their keyboard tray with an elaborate organizer for sticky tabs and mini scissors. There's a bulletin board pinned with motivational Post-its and Pokemon stickers. This isn't just office supplies. It's personality. It's self-expression coded in staples and ink. You pass a meeting room where someone has turned their notes into a color-coded masterpiece, headings in sky blue subpoints in coral, cross-references in lavender. You stare. It's beautiful. You don't remember what the meeting was about, but you remember that chart cut. Of course, it doesn't stop there. You visit a small Tokyo office where stationery reaches religious levels. Employees arrive early to rearrange their pencil trays. There's a shrine to the perfect eraser. People trade sticky notes like rare stamps. And yes, there's a YouTube channel where someone just opens pens. Slowly. Reverently. Hundreds of thousands of views. You get it. Because sometimes in a world full of chaos, a sharp pair of scissors or a perfectly round hole punch feels like control. Feels like peace. You remember when you were a child how the smell of a new notebook could make your heart race? How a pack of colored pencils felt like infinite possibility. That feeling never left. We just rebranded it as office productivity. You lean over one last desk. A clerk has organized his day entirely by Post-it size. Urgent tasks, big squares. Reminders, little flags. Deep thoughts, a single neon note that says, "Remember to breathe." You smile. And as you walk away, you pick up a stray pen from the floor. Test it. It writes like a dream. You quietly put it in your pocket. Don't worry, you'll return it. Eventually, you ease into the final stretch now where fluorescent lights hum low and the office is empty but not asleep. The coffee's cold. The inbox is full. And yet, there's calm here. Because tonight we stand in the quiet glow of the eternal return of papers. You thought it would fade. That digital would win. That cloud storage and email and tablets would finally slay the beast. And yet as you glance across modern desks, what do you see? Notebooks, printers, handwritten notes taped to monitors, sticky tabs, memos, folders. A sign taped to the microwave that says, "Please do not microwave your fish." Paper never left, it just evolved. You step into a sleek glass-walled office in 2023. Desks are minimal, screens are huge, but beside each laptop a paper notebook, a calendar pinned to the corkboard, a to-do list scribbled in ballpoint, one page crossed out, rewritten, crossed out again. And there's a reason for this. Paper is tactile, sensory. It scratches an itch digital can't reach. It crumples when you're frustrated. It folds when you're done. It stacks, shuffles, flutters, feels. You walk into a startup pitch meeting. Everyone's got tablets. But when the real questions start, someone pulls out a printed spreadsheet. And just like that, the energy changes. The page passes from hand to hand like a sacred scroll. Paper gives presence. Digital disappears. Paper stays in your peripheral vision, in your hand, in your pocket. You don't swipe it away, you tuck it somewhere, and find it again when you least expect it. You glance at a generation raised on screens, buying bullet journals, spending hours on calligraphy, printing study notes in color, using paper as rebellion, as therapy, as ritual. Historians still argue whether this paper persistence is nostalgia or practicality. Some say it's neurological, writing helps memory. Others say it's cultural, a holdover from analog life. But whatever the cause, the outcome is clear. Some paper endures. In a data center in Oregon, surrounded by terabytes of digital information, you find a clipboard. Someone jotted down a checklist with a blue pen. It rests beside a blinking server rack as if to remind the future that we are still human. You pause. You flip through a notebook filled with ideas, crossed out lines, arrows, doodles, margin scribbles. None of it exists in the cloud, but all of it matters. And one drawer over a file folder. Inside a letter someone printed, just to feel the words in their hands. The ink is smudged. The signature is crooked. It's perfect. We keep printing, keep scribbling, keep folding, tearing, taping. Even our e-signatures look like handwriting. Even our PDFs try to mimic paper. The world doesn't want to let go, and maybe it shouldn't. Because paper isn't just a tool, it's a mirror, a companion. It's where we record, plan, remember, regret. It holds our taxes and our love poem, our blueprints and breakup notes. It outlasts batteries. It forgives typos. And it's still sitting quietly on your desk, a blank page, waiting, just in case. So now, in this soft and sleepy stillness, you let the pages settle. You hear the faint flutter of imaginary folders closing and the gentle hush of drawers sliding back into place. The fluorescent lights are off. Only the quiet glow of a desk lamp remains. You've wandered through centuries tonight, through ink-stained scrolls, tangled ribbon-tied files, staplers that roared, and paper clips that whispered. You've stood beside resistance symbols inside endless cabinets, beneath towering piles of bureaucracy, and beneath tiny yellow sticky notes that somehow said everything. And yet none of it was loud. None of it tried to dazzle. It was all so ordinary. And that's why it mattered. Because sometimes the most powerful things in history are the ones we barely notice. The things that live in drawers and pencil cups, and under that one calendar you always forget to update. The paper. the pens, the clips, the folders. You exhale now. And somewhere in your mind, a tiny binder clip snaps shut with one last, satisfied, click. You filed away the night. Nothing urgent, nothing loud, just pages quietly holding you together. So close your eyes. Let the paperwork drift behind you like dust in the late afternoon sun. Let the stories fold themselves into sleep, and know that somewhere out there in a drawer not far away, everything is still in order.